Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing well. So, I'm learning a lot about the Romantic era in America. Well, kind of in Europe and America between 1800 and 1870. There's a movement that happens in America and as well in Europe, but it's a kind of a tiny period between 1830 and 1840, and it's called the Transcendentalist movement. It appears, that to me it's a pretty weird movement. I have read Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay of Nature that was written in 1836. I had a teacher who really liked the guy, and he is kind of a poster boy for the Transcendental movement. Now, there was also this element of Kant, Immanuel Kant, who was a German philosopher, in the Transcendental thought movement. Now, there were some points here that I thought I'd want to share with you, and maybe you can, nerd out on it as well. So, it says here that, the Transcendentalists believe that you should be self-reliant. Now, self-reliant, when you think of an Americana liberty term, this means not depending on the federal government, like a nanny state welfare system, for your subsistence, that you should get up, go work, and handle your business, and strive every day on your farm, in your factory, whatever it is you're doing, and earn your own money and not collect a check that is, taken from other people's taxes in order to sustain your lifestyle. But the self-reliant kind of philosophy in Transcendentalism is something different. What they feel is that you actually have to shed society's institutions. And that means that you have to shed religion and politics. And that once you do that, you're going to depend on your inner mental and your mental and spiritual state that comes from in you as an individual. And I guess you're going to look to nature for this. And you're not going to necessarily look to books and your scholars. So I found this to be pretty strange, because they're essentially saying that religion prevents you from coming into your full self spiritually, and your essence is hindered and blocked through religion. And I thought that was quite strange. And the weird part is, as well, you cannot have politics completely removed from society. I mean, any institution that is established is going to have a level of bureaucracy. And when you get a level of bureaucracy, you're going to have politics and, how it's going to be governed, how it's going to be managed, and who is going to be the hierarchical shot callers to handle what needs to be handled. Now, I just think it's pretty strange to think that this sort of inner mental state they're talking about, it's almost as if these transcendentalists are denying, the steadfast nature that comes from being religious. Now, as a Muslim, I can say that this sort of inner mental state comes to me through the permission of Allah, when I focus on Tawheed, when I do my prayers, when I constantly am focusing on learning about the deen, learning about the religion. And when I was an atheist, you don't have the same type of modus operandi. You don't have this. Well, that's how I felt personally. I didn't really feel like I had a purpose. I kind of went around shopping a little bit, eating at restaurants, sightseeing. It was all very superficial and casual, and it really wasn't fulfilling at all. And my inner potential, as they phrase it, I felt like not having God corrupted me, because I didn't really have a purpose, sitting in a bar, sitting in a restaurant. This sort of vapid materialism isn't the same. Now, I know Ralph Waldo Emerson is really close to nature. He sees it in sort of this very spiritual, profound way, looking into, infinite space. He wants egotism to vanish. He wants reality to become transparent to your eyeball. and that through looking at nature, you'll see a sort of current type of unfolding, almost in a sense. Well, actually, like a particle of the universal being, God, right? So it is quite strange, because this decorum and sanctity, he argues, is going to be, in these perennial festivals, a sort of a mock dress, but you're going to tire of it, and that going to the woods is going to return you to reason and faith. I agree with that, right? I agree that nature helps you to kind of see your inner mental state and really get more spiritual. However, hermitages, I myself am kind of a bibliophile hermit, is still, you have to have experience and you have to get and observe other things to unlock true religiosity and true spirituality, I'd argue, because through observing different things and putting your brain in different situations, you will then become to have a more clear sense of ethics, morality, right? So here, for example, he separated politics, right? And I disagree with him in the terms of politics doesn't corrupt necessarily. You need good people to run the country, to put taxes, to build roads, to regulate industry, to, punish those who seek to undermine national sovereignty, to protect your borders from crazy people who, like let's say you're in the 1400s, right? You gotta have a king who is like, hey, what's going on over here, And in today's world, globalism is undermining small businesses and local economies. So if you import everything at a cheap cost with slave labor, and your local economy has to produce it with a higher wage because workers demand higher wages, they cannot sell the higher priced product as well. Even if it's, slightly better, people will always sometimes, most often, try to buy the cheaper product. So you undermine you undermine your own country. So if a leader sells out his own country to globalist, corporate type of banking cartels, this is something that balkanizes the nation and destroys it from within. So you have to pay attention to what your politicians are doing, because your leaders can lead your whole society down the drain. That's why I think the example of Pharaoh, being bad, all the Egyptians got punished. When they got the plagues, when they got all those things, Ad and Thamud in the Quran, right? These people, they got so decadent, so disobedient that the whole society got punished. So their leaders failed in keeping them in line. Their shepherds failed in keeping them with the correct code of conduct. So now, this is something I feel the Transcendentalists get out of. I know it's true that there's like so much money in politics, and even I myself, you want to go to Alaska, we want to do this, but there still has to be a system, today especially, where you have to have some accountability. Now, if you want to do Wild West, there's still going to be politics in the Wild West, as they put it. You go in the wrong saloon, well, guess what? Even the bartender's gonna have something there for you, if you know what I mean. So you cannot just be self-reliant in the sense of only keeping within yourself and depending on your own intellectual abilities. Especially today, I'd argue, you need to have outside perspectives. You need to have somebody come to you and say, hey, this is something, and you need to measure it and weigh it. I mean, your brain is not a democracy, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you cannot isolate your inner mental state all the time. You have to get out of the group and go within the group sometimes. There's a sort of balance and ebb and flow to it. And if everybody's an individual living in their own brain and only focused on their own spiritual essence and who's completely shedded society and its institutions, it's harder for you to relate, because the society needs commonalities in order to stay unified on a unified message, right? Confederate systems don't work. if you have too many little city-states, they war with each other. But if you had a united front where everybody has a similar, like we all have our nuances and our differences, but we're united under a similar creed. So in Islam, we have different sects, but we all agree the Quran is our holy book. We have the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We have foundational things. We may differ on certain rules and such, but we have a unifying, community and institutions and all these things that unite us as Muslims. And I just think it's a little bit of a strange way how they frame it, to open yourselves to what is divine in nature and divine within yourself. How do they measure what is divine without God, without religion? I know that it seems like you could just get kind of like a weird tree hugger. You're going to go around kissing rocks and rubbing leaves on your body and rubbing dirt in your hair and become kind of weird, just studying animals all the time. Now, I observe nature a lot, but I don't think that you are supposed to copycat and take your ethics and morality from something you perceive as divine in nature, because this is a sort of romantic angle. Because, hyenas, they're pretty brutal. A male bear will eat another female's cub. It's pretty brutal. A great white shark, when pregnant, the babies fight and eat each other until one gets out. This is very interesting because they have romanticized nature so heavily that you wonder if Ralph Waldo Emerson even paid attention at all, because a black widow spider is pretty vicious. A praying mantis eats the head off of its mate after it eats. So is that divine? The insect world, if you watch them, like a wasp will go to a honeybee colony and totally try to behead all of the little ants. All the little honeybees. And the honeybees have to group together to take down one big wasp. And when they flock, like they pile on top of the wasp and they make a heat blanket, and this causes, the wasp to pass away. So also, even in, how do you put it? Like with hawks, they will, take off the head of a smaller bird. Crows, ravens and such, they will eat baby squirrels out of the nest. This is something like, hey, nature isn't just this divine kind of romantic, soft bunny, rabbit, sparrow playing on a twig type of reality. So when they say that, if politics corrupts, there's politics in the animal kingdom, right? There's behavior, there's group organization, pecking orders. You see this type of leadership and essence that's in the animals. And each animal has a unique, self-reliant type of inner mental state, but they're cohesive within the group. And society is that group, and the institutions in society formulate that group for you to even be an individual. Now, if you, like I said, you want to be a mountain man, you want to be a Bedouin, you want to be Tarzan in the jungle, you want to be the monk high up in the Tibetan mountains, you can totally do that. But still within you, you possess a certain element of whatever institution helped to form your brain, and whatever your society did to help nourish you through your childhood to form who you are. So I would argue, cannot completely erase society and institutions from your brain. And even if you did, you wouldn't really be, you'd be so, how would I put it? You're so open that it's almost like your brain falls out, So I do find this quite strange. I do. Because when you go into the city, you can still see such decay that you appreciate the woods, you appreciate it, and you begin to see the nastiness of it, but you begin to know how there's this dual world of the forest and the city. And in today's world, the people who live in the city regulate the land of the forests, and corporations are constantly vying for that, to build on it, to do whatever they want to do. And taxpayers in society have to fund that land management to fund the rangers who patrol the land and preserve the forests. So, it's really interesting when you begin to look at it, this, philosophical movement. It's really interesting. So I get the Transcendentalists don't like the austerity of the New England Calvinism, as they put it. But still, I'd argue you cannot just listen to nature and then ignore books, right? Because people look at nature and they write books, I mean, it'd be funny to see what a Transcendentalist says to Darwin, It's just really strange. So, I don't know. Transcendentalism is very kind of weird movement, I'd argue. But I'd love to know your thoughts.